9 games left in the season. What should the Pacers' focus be? How should they balance their goals? Plus, what do the Matherin plus Haliburton lineups look like this far into the season? And Pacers Celtics tonight. Let's revisit the Malcolm Brogdon trade with Alex Golden from Setting the Pace, all coming on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, lots of late season stuff to get to. Alex Golden from Setting the Pace is going to join us to talk about a couple things that I think are relevant at this stage of the season. First and foremost, the Pacers' goals for their final 9 games. I wanted to do this for 10, but was forgetful. So we'll do it for 9, talking about what the Pacers' priorities should be as they push for their final 9 games of the season. Then we'll talk about lineups that feature both Tyrese Haliburton and Bennedict Matherin, the 2 guards of the Pacers' future. How do they look? Who's good with them? What does it mean? And we'll close by talking about the Malcolm Brogdon trade, the last Pacers-Celtics battle this season. How did that trade end up working out for the Pacers? Looks a little better now than it does then, doesn't it? We'll get to it all today with Alex Golden. Let's do it. We are now joined by Alex Golden from Setting the Pace. Many of you, maybe more than half, know him better than me. Talking lots of stuff today. Pacers' last 9 games in their focus because I was lazy and waited after 10 games to go, which would have been more natural. Talking the Mathurin-Haliburton fit. Talking the Celtics tonight. We'll revisit the Brogdon trade today. Alex, 9 games to go. Did you ever think there was any chance the Pacers would have 33 wins at this stage?
No, I think I predicted them to win like under 25. So the fact that they've been this impressive this year has been a breath of fresh air. I think it's actually kept the season more interesting than it probably would have been had they only won like 25 games. So, kudos to them. But I mean, they've overachieved. They're ahead of schedule from where I think a lot of people expected. So still kind of wild to think that they're in play-in contention. So got to keep monitoring everything closely. But how realistic is it going to be for them to make it? I don't know. But it's just wild to say 9 games left, they're still in contention.
Yeah, that's why this conversation that we're about to have is even possible, right? I had 26 when I went through the schedule game by game. They smashed that like at the All-Star break, basically. I think it was like literally the All-Star break. They got to 27. So they're better than people thought, which is why this last 9 games matters, because last year it was over. Brogdon wasn't playing. They had all these new players. Like the focus then was really obvious. Explore what you have with Haliburton, get some young guys new minutes. And they had all these, Justin Anderson was in. Like they had all this stuff to figure out. Yeah, I saw you make a face. It's been a crazy calendar year for the Pacers. Whereas this year, it's interesting in that I feel like a lot of those goals are still applicable, but there's this little angle of like, hey, the play-in, it's right here. Like if the Bulls lose a surprising game, you're right back in it. So they have that to consider. And the phrasing that has been used and what makes this discussion interesting is Kevin Pritchard said it after the trade deadline. He said, we can develop while winning. Rick Carlisle said it. And I think their second practice after the deadline, maybe third, he talked about the balance of development and winning. Players have stated they want to make the plan, but it's not a secret that the draft and getting a top pick would be pretty nice for a team really early in a rebuild. So how that prioritize and balance all that in the last 9 games will be very interesting to me, especially because I think kind of the development part and exploring guys at other positions or the fits. And we've seen a lot of that recently. Like the 2 bigs have been together. They've had these giant lineups. Like they've done some exploring and developing, but they're still trying to win, right? So figuring that balance out, I think, is going to be the goal and objective of these last 9 games and seeing what works and what doesn't.
No, I agree with that, but it's going to be difficult because their schedule is very difficult. I think it's the 4th toughest remaining, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe 6, I can't remember. But I know they've got a lot of tough games, and probably the only game on paper you could say that they'd be the favorite in is against Detroit at home towards the end of the year. So they've got a lot of playoff teams that they're going to go up against. And with how tight the standings have been, specifically in the West, that could play a factor in that. Now, the East is probably going to be more settled towards that last month. Now, it's difficult to figure things out. I think one thing Kevin Pritchard did say, though, that I've gone back to a few different times is that they don't want to be 8th, 9th, or 10th either. And so it's kind of like, do they really want to get in the plan, or do they really want another chance at a good high pick here? Because going into next season, I think the way they've developed and maybe some shakeups that happen with some other teams, who knows what's going to happen in free agency, the offseason, everything is wild in the NBA in the offseason. We know that, but could this Pacers team make a leap to be a playoff team next year? And I think with the growth we've seen from so many players this season, you probably would feel decently optimistic about that. So to me, it's like getting another pick in the top 7, top 8 that can maybe have somewhat of an impact, maybe not to the level of Matherin or Nembhard because they've just been flawless this year, really. I mean, obviously they're not without flaws, but they've been really awesome for rookies.
Right.
If you can get someone else that can have that type of an impact coming in, I think it makes more sense to go the opposite way. I mean, we saw last year, Rick Carlisle led the team to 10 straight losses to end the season. So it's like, are they going that same direction? Probably not, but I still just think the schedule doesn't favor them getting a lot of wins.
Yeah, can they find their Keegan Murray right and then ascend? I mean, look, expecting a Kings level jump is not reasonable, but like that's what happened to them, right? They got the 4th pick from some lottery luck. They traded for Sabonis, and then whoop, all right, they're really good. Like that is a feasible thought process, and I think to me, obviously, player development is like a continuous, never-ending daily goal of every team. The Lakers would like LeBron James to get better every day, right? This isn't just because the Pacers are young, although it is certainly a factor because you grow more as a young player. But I think and we're seeing a lot of this kind of recently, and I referenced it, like when you think about what the Pacers would like to know before free agency or before their next stage of building that's coming this summer is like, can Nembhard be a point guard at the pro level? I think we've kind of figured that out now, but okay, good. So we don't need to think about our post-McConnell future. We're good there. Okay, can Isaiah Jackson play the 4 next to another big all the time? Let's figure that out. Let's play him with Jalen Smith some. Can Jordan Nwora play the 3, or is he exclusively a 4? Same with Aaron Nesmith. What positions can he play? Like all that kind of stuff will influence what they feel like they need, what they feel like they can move guys to, depending on who's available to them in free agency. And they already have 2 semi-ball dominant, talented youngsters. So like figuring out where everybody else slides in, especially the young guys, I think that is kind of the biggest part of development, is not only developing guys' skills at different positions, but seeing what does and doesn't make sense so they can slot all those pieces in when they're making draft, free agency, trade, whatever decisions in the future.
No, and I agree with that. I mean, when I was writing down some of the things that I wanted to see, I just said, obviously, more Matheran and Haliburton. We want to see them in the starting lineup together. That's kind of the future of this team.
We don't know for that exact reason in our second segment.
Yes, for sure. And one of the big things is just like we know that those 2 are the future. And it's like I understand that Buddy Hield is a veteran. He's had a great season here with the Pacers, shooting the lights out of the ball. What is his role moving forward? And I think if you would like to see him as a 6th man maybe next year and kind of swap him and Matheran's roles, could they, the final, 9 games, 8 games, whenever Haliburton gets healthy, could they put Buddy on the bench? I know he doesn't want to sit games. That's pretty obvious from what we've heard from Rick Carlisle. So even if he won't sit, maybe he'll go to the bench and just take a lesser role so they can get a small sample size of what a lineup would look like with specifically Nembhard, Matherin, Tyrese, and Miles. And then at this point, probably Nesmith at the 4. But that's the 5 that I would like to see for longer periods than we've seen throughout the year.
I agree. And I don't know how they can do that. Maybe it's just like Buddy plays a little less. And I think they'd have to be like very obviously eliminated for that to be an easy choice, just because Buddy's good for them. And like his spacing still helps other guys do their thing and explore space. It's just hard to be like, hey, you've had a great year. Don't play anymore. Like it just doesn't work out that way, especially because like he's a vet on a team that is skewing younger. It's like, you don't want to get your replacement drafted, like all this, no player thinks that way, but they have to figure all that kind of stuff out. That's why I've been really interested in, and we'll talk about the big one, the Matheran and Haliburton duo, but like I want to do a segment before the season ends on Nwora and O'Shea Brissett together, just because it's like the Pacers only 2 6'8" size dudes. Like how much do they help maybe not those 2 specifically, like Brissett's a free agent. They clearly have a roster crunch all the picks they have, but did they learn a lot about having 2 similar-sized guys out there? You mentioned Nesmith at the 4. I agree. They've been exploring that all season. Like, also, I mentioned this too. Like, Jackson and Smith have been playing together. I remember this after the draft. Kevin Pritchard said something we like about Jackson is we think he can play the 4, and I think he does better guarding a DeMar DeRozan than a Vucevic, for example. Right? Like, how do you figure that out if you can't? It's hard to play him because they have a lot of young guys deserving of minutes. Right? I understand that the trouble's in their way. But in these last 9 games, while if Haliburton's playing, they can beat anybody. I'm not saying they will or would be favored to, but they can. Yeah. So when you're playing your young guys and doing what you can to develop and win at the same time, like how much exploration and development can you do at those different positions? That will dictate everything. And there's more positional stuff. Like neither of us have said Chris Duarte's name yet, Alex. Like,
yeah, he's on my list.
He's an interesting guy to think about in this situation as well. Like they have a lot to explore. And that I think is the big picture focus to me of these last 9 games. And a lot of the segments I will take on or talk about with this team is how guys look in either a new role or a new position or something that's just unique about that game or a recent stretch.
Yeah, I mean, with Chris Duarte, it just feels like, unfortunately, through his first 2 years, he's been almost injury prone. And it's like, is that going to be a long-term thing? Is it something they can trust moving forward? How does he fit? This is where I kind of go back to, okay, if you want to put Buddy on the bench for next year, how does Duarte play with Buddy and maybe TJ McConnell in the second unit? Is that a unit that would work? Maybe play them some minutes together. They don't have to necessarily come off the bench, but just give a little bit of a sample size there. And does Jordan Nwora fit there as the 4, or is there somebody better that fits there? Who's the better 5 moving forward behind Miles? Is it Jalen or Isaiah? I think there's so many question marks, and with the way the roster is constructed, there's going to have to be, in my opinion, some consolidation going into next year, because there's so many guys that you want to see get minutes to prove themselves, but it's like, how much longer are we going to keep Isaiah Jackson as the 3rd or 4th string center, or Jalen Smith as a 3rd or 4th string center? Are we going to play Daniel Tice more when we're trying to make the playoffs? Are we going to try to trade him? I mean, there's just, what I'm saying? There's just so many different ways to look at this. I just feel like there's just too many guys that you value. And if you add draft picks into it, where is all this playing time going to? So that's why you have to make a decision. Okay, is O'Shea and Jordan Nwora, are they 2 guys that can play together, or are you picking between one or the other? It's just, there's so many like position battles almost within the roster construction itself. And there's almost guys standing in each other's way.
Yes, it's weird to call it. I agree with you with everything you just said. It's weird to call it standing in their way when it's like they're almost jostling for the same minutes. It's not like, you know what I mean?
No, I get you.
This isn't the same situation because this Hawks team ended up being good. But like, I remember when the Hawks got like a bunch of young dudes in the summer of 2020, and they went in with all these inexperienced guys like Trae Young, Cam Reddish, Bogdan-Bogdanovic. They just got Capella. John Collins was still in his rookie deal. Man, they had Herter, they had DeAndre Hunter, and everybody was like, okay, these guys are all good, obviously, but like, you can't play all of them at the same time. It's just not possible. And the prevailing thought was they would have to make a consolidation trade. Instead, they just traded Kevin Herter for nothing, which was exceedingly stupid. But that was the thinking then, and that's a little different. At least the Pacers are a little more spread out positionally than that, and they don't have quite as many young dudes. But that's kind of what it reminds me of, is eventually they'll have to kind of figure out who to move and who not to. And it's not so even beyond figuring out who fits in what role. It's like, who do we want to keep? And look, it's not a secret. They have 3 free agents and 5 draft picks. I don't think they want to sign 0 players in free agency. So It's going to be a pretty busy summer for Mr. Pritchard and Buchanan trying to figure this all out. And look, 9 games should not change your decisions drastically, but getting more data points is certainly valuable.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. It's like they have enough of a sample size from the previous 72 games, whatever it is, 73 games, that they know exactly, for the most part, which direction they want to head. I think you've seen so much growth from your rookies already this year. You feel pretty good about that. It feels like the sophomore class took a bit of a step back, maybe from where they were hoping they'd be at this year. I don't think Isaiah Jackson has taken a drastic step from the previous year. Maybe you might disagree with that. I think he's improved, but I don't think he's maybe leaped that much ahead. I think Jalen Smith has had a very odd year, going from starter to backup 5 to out of the rotation to now playing sparing minutes between him and Isaiah. And then, it's just like, what is his role moving forward? Obviously, he took a huge pay cut to come here, from what we heard, maybe reported out there, with him going somewhere else for more money and, promising a starting role and then kind of getting that taken away from me. I think that's just tough. But I do like what he's done as a backup 5 better than any other position that he's played this year. So now you just have, once again, a logjam. I mean, they got rid of Goga and Terry Taylor, and they still have a big man problem. So it's like this roster, for the most part, is a bunch of guards and a bunch of centers, and they need to address the wing position. That's why I was really, intrigued by the Jordan Nwora trade, because a guy that's 6'8" that can shoot the ball as well as he shot it. I think that there's a lot of potential for him on this team. But if you draft somebody at 6, 7, 8, 9, wherever that plays the same position, what are you going to value more, developing your rookie or someone that's on an expiring contract? And so that's why it's like I'm intrigued by what he is, but how much of a long-term fit is he actually on this team?
Right. That's a lot of decisions. I can't believe we're talking about a logjam at center. I feel like I've been doing that for
like you trade Sabonis and it's still worse. Like,
yeah, well, look, I don't think anybody thought Smith would be very good at the end of last season, and whatever. It is what it is. You know who's not centers, Alex? Tyrese Haliburton and Bennedict Matherin.
Yes.
Let's dive into the fit of those two guys. Hey guys, let's take a short little break here so I can talk to you about Nissan's most electric player of the week, which is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. It's got to be Bennedict Matherin for me this week. Did a whole segment on him yesterday, highlighting how efficient he's been. 33 points on just 15 shot attempts since returning from injury this week. He's been powerful getting to the rim, drawing those fouls, showing exactly where he helps his Pacers team with their pace, their scoring, their efficiency, and his nosy defense is still just as strong as ever. 2 games back after his first ever injury this week, and he's looked electric, brilliantly fierce, fiercely elegant, stunningly powerful, and elegantly powerful. He is delivered on duality just like the Nissan Ariya, a combination of fierceness and elegance, both beautiful and strong. It's the perfect crossover. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin you to your seat, power, and premium intelligence all in one electric vehicle. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the electric vehicle for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Thank you, everybody, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Check out Setting the Pace next with Alex and Facci.
All right.
All things Pacers every single day. Or if I'm your second listen, or we, after you listen to Setting the Pace, even better. I want to talk about a lot of duos down the stretch of the season. That's part of the evaluation. Let's just start with the big one. Why not? Jump right in. Bennedict Matherin and Tyrese Haliburton. They have played a lot together still, which I think is important. I think that got lost early in the season when everybody was talking about them playing together and all this stuff. They have over 800 minutes together, despite many injuries. That's almost as much as they have individually apart. It's about 1,000 for each of them. It's like, that's fine, given, again, the number of injuries they've had. Let's talk some numbers. This is high level numbers. I'm sure there's more nitty gritty stuff we can get into, but with both of them on the floor, Pacers have a plus 2.34 net rating, insane, unbelievable 120.8 offensive rating, and an awful defensive rating, 118.5. With just Haliburton, minus 2.8 net rating, with a bananas offensive rating and basically the worst defensive rating in the league. With just Matherin and no Haliburton, horrible offensive rating, below 110, 109.2. Defensive rating that's credible at 115.4. That's still a minus 6. Oof. And with both off, it's a plus 0.89 net rating with a mediocre offense and a slightly above average defense. So they clearly fit together. The team can do one thing well with one guy and one thing well with the other guy.
Yeah.
And they're not exactly lined up. The key factor to remember is one guy on and the other off is usually the bench unit, and the opposite is true for Haliburton. But those numbers are interesting to me. The big one, though, that stands out is, as two guys that are a key part of the team's future, plus 2.3 with them both on in year one. They're 23 and 20 years old. It's pretty good. Pretty good starting point.
Yeah. Anytime you see the net rating in the positive, I think you always have to be excited about that moving forward, even if it's a small positive, just 2.3.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, but overall, the defense, we've seen it, and then that's the big thing. It's like, what other combinations have been out there that have looked really impressive? And when I was looking at some of the numbers today, looking at 3-man combinations and 4-man combinations with Matherin and Haliburton out there together, their best ones have been with Turner and Aaron Nesmith. And that kind of makes sense because of the defensive reasons. And I think that's why we're starting to see these two they've found some chemistry. Obviously, we've seen closing lineups with Matherin and Hield on the floor together. And I know that's been a big talking point. Like, can they play together? Well, yeah, they can. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. There's better combinations out there than those, three together or whatever. But I just feel like overall, looking at the numbers, you have to be intrigued by what you've seen from the rookie season of Bennedict Matherin and Tyrese Haliburton. Now, the big question is, moving forward, what position is Matherin going to play naturally? Is he going to be more of a 2 or a 3? Because I personally think you can't replace Nembhard's defense with Matherin's defense because he's just not even close to the same level of defender. And I think that puts more pressure on Tyrese on the defensive side of things, trying to take on matchups that he's not going to be able to take on. So with that being said, I think that you still look better with having Nembhard out there with those two, but you're going to get a lot of points with those two playing together. And I think Matherin's shooting numbers have been really kind of all over the place this year. Really good to start off, then dipped and shot terrible for like December through January. February wasn't great either, but this month, since he's come back from the injury, he's looking a lot better efficiently. So hoping that that's something he can just kind of work on and, tighten up over the summer.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think the position of Matherin's going to matter. And I think I talked about this with Jackson last segment, but like you kind of are what you guard to me in my head. If you can credibly guard a position, you can play it. Not quite sure about Matherin guarding threes just yet. He is a better on-ball than off-ball defender at this stage. That is a big point of growth for him because if he can guard threes well, they already trust Nembhard to guard like any position. He was guarding Pascal Siakam last night, for Pete's sake. So yeah, that would help a lot with the fit of those three. And look, they could end up drafting or acquiring somebody at any position, but that matters a lot for the fit. That said, something that has always stood out to me with this pairing, I dug through some lineup data on them like a long time ago this season for a story, not a podcast, and it always felt like their best groups really leaned in one way or the other, as in if it was Matherin and Haliburton and Hield and whatever, two offensive-minded players in your front court, they were a plus because they had this great offensive rating. And if you had like Turner and McConnell and Brissett, it was a good group because they had a good defensive rating. If you kind of balanced it, it wasn't so good, right? They needed to really lean into one strength or the other. So it's really interesting to look at their trios, and you already named it. The big one is Turner. NBA.com numbers here. So some estimation going on. I hate estimating, but it's a lot harder to do this stuff any other way. Matherin, Haliburton, Turner together, 420 minutes plus 9 net rating, 118 offense, 109 defense. That is crazy good. 118 offense would be the second best offense in the league. 109 defense would be the best defense in the league. Obviously, that's only 420 minutes. That's not even close to enough sample to like really get into it. But that trio has been awesome. With Hield, when they lead into offense, 120 offensive rating and like a league average defensive rating plus 5.8. You said the Nesmith one, 122.8 offensive rating, 114.1 defensive. That's unsustainably huge. That's also 251 minutes. But like, I think they've shown, and what the numbers say is like, you stick them with some defenders, they're both good enough offensively by themselves to make that group good. And I think that is noteworthy too, as they kind of slide in pieces in the future to go, we don't necessarily need offensive traits if they're playing with these guys. If they can just lean into defense, those lineups can be really good.
Yeah, and that's a great point because I'm looking at some of the 4-man combinations too, and the best net rating, which I kind of already threw out there. I didn't set the number, but it's a 23.2 plus 23.2 is Turner, Haliburton, Nesmith, and Matherin, but they've only played 147 minutes. So that's not a lot, but a 104.8 defensive rating is amazing with a 128.1 offensive rating is huge. So it's like, I definitely want to see that. Now, some of these numbers, though, I was a little bit surprised by because the best pace, or the fastest pace, I should say, 108.36 in the 4-man lineup.
Holy smokes.
Haliburton, Matherin, Turner, and Jalen Smith. Like, how is Jalen Smith leading with the fastest pace between these combinations? So I was
Can I give you a really crappy theory on that?
You can.
The defense was so awkward and bad that the other team could attack a mismatch like instantly. And so their defensive pace was so high.
Their defensive rating was a 103.5.
Wow.
And their offensive rating was a 97.6. They were a -6 net rating. Obviously, there's a reason why Jalen Smith's not in the starting lineup anymore. But yeah, it's funny because it's just like the Nesmith, Haliburton, Matherin numbers, whenever they're combined together, they've been really good, but it's been a small sample size. Like, 147 minutes for a 4-man combo is not that many. So, but I think that is kind of a telling stat in terms of what type of player could fit well with those two, and a defensive-minded wing that can maybe put the ball in the hoop a little bit. Like when Nesmith shot the ball incredibly well whenever he got put in the starting lineup and playing with Haliburton. So I think if you can just find that balance, I think that's going to help that duo grow. is finding that right third player to go with him. And it could be Turner, but I think getting another wing that could be a little bit more efficient than what we see from Nesmith makes a lot of sense.
Alex, are you ready for some lazy analysis from me? Are you prepared?
I'm ready for this.
Okay. Buddy Hield's a good shooter, right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Plus 5.8 when that trio's out there.
Yeah.
Miles Turner's a good shooter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus 9. We did that one. Andrew Nembhard is an okay shooter, right?
Yep.
Okay. I clicked on the wrong tab. Plus
3.1
with him.
Yeah.
Nesmith, an all right shooter, right? Plus 11. We did that one. Then Jalen Smith, bad shooter. Minus 5.8. Isaiah Jackson, not a shooter. Minus 7. O'Shea Brissett should be a better shooter, but isn't. Minus 14. These are the trio lineups. Minus 15. TJ McConnell, actually a good shooter, but not actually a good shooter because of the perception. He's like, it's so weird. Like, he's always wide open, but he makes them now. So he shot a 3 against Toronto as a tangent. It was the fastest 3 he's ever shot in a catch and shoot. Like, he caught it and just whipped it up. And I went, whoa, and he drilled it. Anyway, not perceived as a good shooter, although has been.
Yeah.
Minus 7.6.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's going to fit well with Haliburton and Matherin, who are really good
shooting.
with the ball and do great shots? Shooting, yeah.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, it's funny, man. It's so cool to see McConnell from being played off the floor in a playoff series against Miami in the bubble to where he's at now. I was at that game in Wisconsin when they played the Bucks, and I was laughing because we got the classic Coach Bud grabbing his hair, just so upset when McConnell hit that 3. Like, the first one he made, he was like, oh, no, you know how he does. And I started cracking up because I was kind of on the corner behind the Pacers bench, and you could just see it so plain as daylight. I was just like, this is what I love seeing, like coaches ripping out whatever hair they have left because TJ McConnell is just making them pay for going under the screen. And it's so funny, man. I mean, honestly, when I look at this lineup, though, like when I look at all these like different combinations, it's just fascinating to me where the Pacers are and how much better they've been when they've just been able to outplay teams offensively. So their defense has been bad, but their offense has been so good. And you can kind of look at what the Kings have done this year. We know that there's such a comparison with the Pacers and the Kings because of the trade, but like they've just went all in on the offensive stuff. And I don't know if that's sustainable for the playoffs. I don't think Rick Carlisle believes that's the way to win in the NBA because he's emphasized defense from day one at training camp. But I think that if you have this many talented offensive players, there is a formula to winning.
Agreed. Mike Brown has leaned out. I'm very curious how the Kings will do. I'm glad that they've gotten a lot of respect recently, but I still think like 26 defense. That is.
I'm worried about them in the playoffs going out.
That is rough. That is. I think they'll win their first round series still, but that is tough defense. Yeah, I'm actually devastated about TJ McConnell. He has missed 2 free throws since the All-Star break. That's nothing. But by missing those 2 free throws, he is no longer a 50, 40, 90 guy, which just crushes me. That had the chance to be one up. This is kind of a knock on his past, but he's done really well to make this a thing. But like that, like if you had told me that before the season, I'd have laughed extraordinarily hard. And he's like been legitimately a threat from 3 at times. So here we are.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how many free throws does he need to get back up into that 90% range.
It depends. Oh, how many would he have to make in a row? I have to check. I think it has to be close to 7 or 8 at this stage. I think.
Well, let's just hope he gets to the free throw line. That'd be great.
9 off the top of my head. I believe it's a 9.
I'm ready to watch that. I know it's not that important, but like there's little things to watch towards the end of the season. That's part of it. Like McConnell get enough free
little
throws
things to watch for free throws. Buddy Hield, who has been quietly not making his free throws recently, is now below his threshold for a bonus in his contract for free throw percentage. Got to be hitting those. On that note, let's pivot. Pacers play tonight against the Celtics. Let's talk Pacers Celtics. But by doing so, we're going to be talking about a little bit more about the Brogdon trade because Nesmith, has warranted some discussion. Let's talk a little bit about the game. One more break here, guys, so I could talk to you about Ibotta. Watching your closet grow after purchasing all this season's latest trends. I have way too many clothes. How about also watching your cash back grow with each purchase with Ibotta? You can earn cash back on every shopping trip. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items from produce to personal care to pantry goods. You just link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get cash back. It's super easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year in real cash back. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip or use the cash back for the flight you've been eyeing, that game you've been dying to go to, fancy dinner you've been craving, a typical basket of groceries. It's over $50 more expensive at the end of 2022 than the beginning due to inflation. You can earn 2.5 times that in cash back from Ibotta, or even more depending on how much you use it. It gives you real cash back, not points. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back. Cash you can put in your bank account, PayPal, or into gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too, and you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying the app and using the code LOCKED when you register. Just in your App Store, Google Play, download the free Ibotta, IBOTTA app, and use the code LOCKED, that's IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use the promo code LOCKED Ibotta. Check it out. Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Second listen, easy peasy. John Krause, Locked On Celtics, here about the other side of this street and the Celtics, who are not playing the best right now. Somehow, every time the Pacers play the Celtics, they're in like one of their random slumps this season, even though they're still near the top of the East. I want to start by revisiting the Brogdon trade before we talk big picture about this game, because I was thinking about it recently, and I think that the reporting around Brogdon's market, the 11th pick being in play from the Knicks and the 10th pick being in play from the Wizards, set this kind of lottery pick bar in everybody, including my own head. And they got Nesmith and it looks like it's going to be 28 and Daniel Tice. And everyone's kind of like, huh? Turns out Nesmith's pretty good. And he, as a former lottery pick, probably should have been valued a little higher. And this got me thinking both about, one, that this trade has turned out to look better for the Pacers than it did, but two, just the strategy they have done with Smith, Nesmith, now Wara. I'll be curious if they can pull it off with anybody else. They might be out of roster spots to do it. Of these reclamation projects has kind of given them more grace to do more trades like this in the future, because they've all kind of worked. So I think that they got good value for Brogdon, given that he was only playing, he's played up more this year, but 55, 60 games for them. And clearly it was time to pivot. They did better than it looked like they did at the time. And it's only taken 73 games to figure that out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were freaking out too after watching Aaron Nesmith in Summer League. That's why you should never take Summer League that seriously, because Aaron Nesmith was just he just didn't fit in right away.
He
was
I think
awful.
he would say that. Yeah.
And then if you look at what he did at the beginning of the season, he was really inconsistent. Like, he wasn't knocking down a shot at all. I know we talked about it a lot on our podcast. Like, is this guy ever going to make a three? Like, he's not consistently hitting shots. And it's like, I was at one point saying, like, give O'Shea Nesmith's minutes, because he's been that bad. Like, you get the pick. I think that, Pritchard talked about wanting to acquire as many picks as possible. So even if it's a bad pick, quote unquote bad pick, like late first, it's still got some value to it. I mean, you can obviously package it, trade it up, that kind of thing. And Daniel Tice, I mean, that to me is still a little bit shocking that he's on the roster still after the trade deadline, just because veteran guy, didn't make a whole lot of sense for a rebuilding team. And with the knee surgery, maybe that did play a big factor into like his trade value and what other teams thought of him across the league. But this guy has constantly gotten traded in the NBA. So it just felt like, okay, what was really his purpose besides being a salary filler? So not a whole lot. So we'll see what happens with him moving forward. But I think Aaron Nesmith really was kind of what turned the entire season around. Him taking Jalen Smith's spot at the starting power forward position, the way he's improved as a shooter, playing with Tyrese a little bit more, I think, than playing with McConnell, probably just different looks. And the way that he's been able to take on the most important defensive matchups. I mean, I know Nembhard still takes on a lot of the guard matchups, but if you're looking at the wings across the league, hey, Nesmith, that's your job, guard him. He's gotten in foul trouble. It's been a learning season for him, but I think now that you think about it, he's probably part of your core moving forward. Whether he's a starter long-term or not, I don't know, but I think you have to feel really confident about it. And he's on a really good contract right now. And you don't have to worry about the awkwardness that would have been there if it had been Brogdon and Haliburton. I think that's kind of something that's a little bit forgotten, because they could have played together, I think, but I prefer not having Haliburton have to kind of like deflect a little bit and let Brogdon have the veteran role as more on-ball point guard.
Yeah, they wouldn't have fit poorly. They played together last year a little bit. Like, it was fine. It wasn't awesome. It wasn't bad. It was fine. Yeah, it made sense. Doing the trade made sense. Like trading away Brogdon made a ton of sense.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's kind of like, oh, okay, at the value, but it's clearly worked out in their favor. This has also led to a philosophical debate in my head. I have this thought all the time, right? This is, I never have asked an exec this, but I'd be curious too, right? Do you think trade should be evaluated based on the perceived value at the time the trade was made or the result of the trade, right? Because here's how Pacers fans do this, right? The Kawhi Leonard trade was fine because no one knew Kawhi would be good when they did it, right? But the Victor Oladipo trade was fine because it worked out for the Pacers. It's like, well, but then the Kawhi trade was bad, right? Like you have to think of it's interesting to think about both sides where it's like the perceived value of this Brogdon deal was kind of like, but it's turned out to be like, all right, that was great. And I think the result is the most important part of the evaluation, but it does matter what players' values were at the time of the trade. Like that's the only time that's their value. It changes the second, it doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about, but I always think about that part of it, like what makes sense and what's fair in that discussion.
Well, I think it's always easy to go back and evaluate based on the results of the trade.
It is.
But that's the easy way of looking at how you like evaluate a trades. But I think in the moment, you really have to think like, is this really a good deal? Like, are we going to get crushed for this or not? Or what really is his value? Is that the best value we could get? Or were we just wanting to trade him to Boston because that's where he wanted to go? I think that it was interesting that, Brogdon did bring that up and said that they let him pick where he wanted to be traded. So they were trying to work with him. I think they were trying to, them getting that out in the public, like, I don't think that's something the Pacers wanted, but Brogdon putting it out there doesn't do anything but help the front office look like a player friendly front office. Because I know that there's been some rumblings from what Paul George has said before that makes them look like they're not player friendly. So this does kind of help. Maybe like if you get potential free agents wanting to come here, like, okay, well, they work with me if something's not working out, that kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely think that that's a great point though, that you bring up, like, how do you evaluate it? I still think results makes the most sense because you can see what happened, but I still think the value part of it is also like, wow, like what really is their value?
Yeah. It's like, I think it's unfair to just be like, oh, it made sense at the time. Like, okay, that's fine. Like, I get why they did it, but like, it's still dumb. Like, it turned out to be dumb. It's fine to say that. But yeah, this one, we're not comparing it to the Kawhi trade, but like this one's one of those where Nesmith has immediately become better, right? And that's how young players are. And I think another part of this is that's like harder to know. And I don't know if the Pacers have ever truly said this, but like they talked about this with Wara, like they'd been tracking him since his draft year, like they were a fan of him then. So they might have slightly more affinity for him than maybe other teams do besides the Bucks, who obviously have him and have made decisions with him in mind. Nesmith got picked 4 slots before their pick in his draft. Or wait, they didn't have a pick in his draft, did they? I was thinking of 2019. Yeah. Nesmith got picked in a year they didn't have a pick. Excuse me. But
and then they've got all these players from that draft.
Yeah, now they have like 3 lotto guys, right?
Sorry.
They have Wara too. Yeah, they have 1/15 of the 2020 draft now. If they, I'd have to ask. I mean, I'm sure they were in some capacity, but like if they were a fan of him that year, then great. You track him and he's available, and great. You can finally get that guy that you were a fan of. Like that all makes sense. So I think that the discourse around the trade at the time still made sense, but it's worked out better for the Pacers now, and it's worked out for the Celtics. Brogdon, 61 games played for them, probably going to get close to 70. And the term I used with Corrales talking about it was Goldilocks theory. This has been talked about with Jeremy Grant, but like his role with the Bucks, too small. His role with the Pacers, too big. His role with the Celtics, just right. That was it. And that's why he's been pretty good for them.
Oh, I love that. That's hilarious. That's the first time I've heard that. So I'm sorry I missed that one, but that's a great analogy. But it's honestly like Marcus Smart's not had the best year this year. And so I think having Brogdon to kind of be there to steady the ship a little bit. Derek White's had a really good year too. So Brogdon has been a nice fit for them. And obviously when Brogdon talked about the trade, he's like, yeah, Coach Ime had called him and talked to him about his role. And then all the stuff that went down with Coach Udoka, like it's been a lot of changes over there for Boston, especially coming off a finals run. And I mean, I can see why he was excited to go there because his team looked like they were, and they still could be, poised to win a championship. Now they've been playing a little bit worse than last year probably, but they still got a group that's been there. They've done that. And Brogdon has playoff experience with the Bucks before he came here. And even here he had a little bit, but I think he's going to add value to that team. He already has added value. He's been in the conversation for, 6th man of the year. And, I I really like the fit with Brogdon in Boston. It's actually been kind of nice to see him go somewhere where he can thrive in a different role and you still help a team and be impactful. But like you said, the Nesmith trade has been really beneficial for him because the whole 2020 draft is just kind of wild because of like the lack of like workouts they were able to do, no NCAA tournament. And I think some of these guys got shortened seasons because of it, shortened off seasons, all that. Maybe the Pacers were able to swoop in and get a flyer on a guy, probably because the team was eager to, move off of him because they're in a different spot trying to compete for a championship. And the Pacers can say, hey, we'll take this risk. And now look how that might reward them in the end. Maybe in a couple of years, Aaron Nesmith's a decent part of a championship, or not a championship, but a playoff contending team with the Pacers.
I can't remember if it was Smith or Nesmith that said this to me, but they basically called this year like the rookie year, right? Because their offseason was so weird. Their pre-draft process was all on Zoom. Jalen Smith got to the league, got picked, did his presser, and then got COVID immediately. And they went draft, and then they had like 3 days before training camp, and then they had this whole season of these weird rules and no fans and all this stuff. It's like, that was tough.
Yeah.
And they had last year, which was like a hybrid of the two. So it's like, this is the first like normal year for those guys, right? So their development looks a little different. So snapping up a lot of the 2020 draft could be just a bet on that weirdness helping those guys long term. The Celtics tonight, Pacers have beaten them once, lost to them at home. They can beat the Celtics. I don't think they're better than the Celtics, but they've played them tough twice. You think they can win this game? I mean, the Celtics are weird. Like, they're obviously good. Their point differential's bananas, but they just lose like weird games a lot. They just lost the Rockets last week.
Yeah, exactly. They just lost the Rockets and the Jazz. Now, the Jazz have been better than the Rockets for sure, but still, that's a team that should be taking care of business against the Jazz. And honestly, they've fallen. I think, are they the third spot now in the Eastern Conference?
They're back to second because Philly lost to Chicago. Yeah.
Right. But that, I mean, right there is a reason why they're trying to win, because if they get in a 2-3 playoff matchup with Philly, they don't want to be on the road for that. I mean, we saw how much home court meant to them last year in the playoffs. So, this is a weird Boston team. The Jaylen Brown stuff that's come out recently is definitely, I don't know if that's making a big deal with their locker room or not, but it seems like it's getting magnified a little bit in the public eye. And then you got a rookie coach in Joe Mazzulla, who's had success obviously this season, but some people are starting to doubt him a little bit and what he can do. I think it's a little too early to do that, but I've just been impressed with how the Pacers have played them so well. And it's just like this Pacers team sweeping the Raptors. I mean, what is this team this year? I just like, it's so back and forth for me. It's like, we've seen the highs and the lows of this Pacers team. So, I mean, they can win this game. I think they can honestly hang with about anybody, but it's just if they're hitting their shots or not.
Yeah, that is certainly the case. They're on fire from deep when they beat them in Boston early this season. So they'd have 4 more wins if they had swept these crappy teams, right? Detroit, San Antonio, Charlotte, because they got swept by the Spurs somehow. The Pacers did.
I know. What is up with that?
So they'd have a winning record if they just beat crappy teams, right? They are wildly inconsistent this year.
I know. It's wild, man. I was just looking at them like, how do you get swept by the Spurs but then sweep the Raptors? Like, okay.
They would be right behind Miami. They'd be 8th, 37 and 36. Yeah, I feel terrible for Jaylen Brown because someone asked him, what do you think of your future in Boston? And that right there, you lose. No matter what you say, you lose. Like, it's just such a hard spot for a player to be. And you got to ask the questions, but just like, if he says the Kyrie thing and says, I love it here, I want to be here forever, and then they trade him, it's like, well, that looks bad for you or the team. And if you say, I don't know, and then it looks bad, you just lose. No matter what, I feel kind of bad for him
exactly
in that way. But he's talented, and he's part of why this is a tough matchup for the Pacers. They have 2, and if you count Brogdon and Smart as big enough, 4 of the size dudes that the Pacers just can't handle. We'll see. I'll be interested in how they can do it. And the Pacers scheduling, ouch. They play, and then 22 hours later, they play again way down in Atlanta. That's as close to a scheduled loss as you can have. 3 and 4 nights on the road, travel between them all. So if they want to win one of these 2, it seems like the Boston one's much more likely. Alex?
Yeah.
I have nothing else today unless you do.
Nope, I'm good. Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it.
Check out Setting the Pace, where Alex and Michael Facci can break down their takes on this Indiana Pacers team that is close to reaching the finish line. Monday here, we'll be talking Celtics, Hawks, Mavs, storylines from the weekend, all sorts of things. Did the Mad Ants make the playoffs or not? Their last 2 games are this weekend. It's all coming here on Locked On Pacers. Alex, is on this side of me. I pointed the wrong way. Is on Twitter at Alex Golden NBA. I am there at T East NBA. If you want to hear more musings in social media land while Twitter still exists. Thank you guys a ton for listening today. We will all see you soon.